I want America to withdraw to her borders. I want America to pull out the troops out of South Korea. I want them to pull the troops out of Japan. I want them to pull the troops out of Germany. I want them to pull the troops out of the Middle East. I want them to sail home.
The veteran who owns the car told us she has no idea who Mike is.
Mike. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. But your name.
USAID was running a social network app for Cuban dissidents to try to influence them to overthrow their government. That's just, I mean, they do that constantly. From what I heard, they're moving it under direct control of the State Department. So is it really going away? Yes. Part of what made USAID so successful was the way that it was able to conceal CIA connections. If the State Department is directly funding something, it's very clear who's funding it. When you have 8 different nonprofits called the Endowment to Protect Democracy and Puppies, and somebody says, I'm against the Endowment to Protect Democracy and Puppies, every liberal is a rube. So they just hear what you call yourself and go, that must be what you support. You must be the Support Freedom for Women in Yemen organization. Oh, okay. I'll believe anything you say uncritically. It's good for the mask to come off. Because a lot of people fall for the mask. That's why you wear a mask. I want the U.S. State Department to directly fund the countries and the groups that we're supporting. I want it to be obvious that we are an anti-democratic, fascistic, dictatorial state.
Congress writes a law that dictates how USAID spends money to make sure that we're countering Chinese influence inside Africa, to make sure that we don't lose access to critical mineral supplies, so that we're fighting back against Hezbollah in Lebanon. So that
there's even more and better clips of this that are longer, like where they talk about how USAID is just it's American covert ops.
USAID fights terrorist groups all across this world, making sure that we address the underlying causes for a retreat to terrorism. USAID chases China all around the world, making sure that China doesn't monopolize contracts for critical minerals and port infrastructure all around the world. It supports freedom fighters everywhere in this world. Up until yesterday, delivering firewood, for instance, to the brave Ukrainian defenders on the Eastern Front. USAID.
It supports freedom fighters. It chases China. Now, this is exactly why it's good. It's getting cut. Like, I think that a lot of people who are liberals, who try to posture as leftists, are being exposed right now. The reality is that a lot of bad shit's gonna go down. Cutting USAID, who gives a fuck? I want America to withdraw to her borders. I want America to pull out the troops out of South Korea. I want them to pull the troops out of Japan. I want them to pull the troops out of Germany. I want them to pull the troops out of the Middle East. I want them to sail home. I want us to rip apart aircraft carriers with welding torches and turn them into bridges and plowshares, literally. I want the United States to sit back and solve its own goddamn problems. And if you're like, well, what will the world do without American leadership? You're a fucking dope. No, Mike, I'm a devout socialist. I just happen to be from an actual African nation. I understand very well how heavily dependent most of these countries are on USAID development for malaria, which is the #1 cause of death for children. Do you actually think defeating malaria is as hard as... Do you think it's that hard? There used to be endemic malaria in the southern United States, and we got rid of it in a couple years. They're not doing anything to solve malaria. They're tinkering around the edges. There are millions and millions of people dying from curable diseases, and the American government doesn't care to provide the doses and medicines. Whether it's tuberculosis, whether it's malaria, you're saying that, oh yeah, the USAID throws a couple $2 billion toward humanitarian effort. That means that we should support the US doing fucking coups all over the world. Fuck no. Thousands of people will die because of this decision. Millions die because of the USAID. For example, even if you're just talking about like food aid, American food aid destroys domestic agricultural production by undercutting local African labor. So you hollow out the agricultural industry, the indigenous agricultural industry within large swaths of Africa, and you get people dependent upon American food aid. There's a million things that like USAID is a failure. It's not helping Africa. That's why countries that throw out American influence are the ones that develop the best, or ones that the United States selects for actually being able to move up the value chain. Okay, here we go, chat. This is what USAID does. Let's go. This is from U.S. Special Operations Vision 2020. This is a vision for 2021 and beyond. U.S. First Special Forces Command Airborne, August 2021. This is a Special Forces operating vision. And they're giving an example. Are you ready? They have a chess pieces, America and China, which is what this is all about. A civil affairs team acting as a civil military support element from the 91st Civil Affairs Battalion on its third tour to a West African nation or Naravu. I can never say these. I can never say shit. Don't make fun of my pronunciation of names. I can't. Was on its way to meet with a local government leader. While driving on the highway, the team noticed a billboard with Chinese characters, a photo of a southern port city, and a prominent yellow ribbon. The CMSE took a photo and continued on their meeting. Upon returning to their team house, they shared the photo with their cross-functional team, a Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha from the 3rd Special Forces Group, and a Psychological Operations Detachment from the 7th Psychological Operations Battalion. Recognizing the billboard's near-peer competition significance, they developed a plan to investigate the Chinese activity. Each element would gather information from their respective indigenous partners in security, governance, development, and information, while also exploring local, publicly available information. When the CFT reconvened after their reconnaissance efforts, the SFODA's assistant detachment commander mentioned the Navarian commando team leader, a longtime acquaintance, stated high-level Chinese officials recently visited to discuss large-scale real estate investment. At a local development meeting, the CMSE learned the Chinese purchased land around the southern port city. The PSYOP detachment located advertisements on the local social media outlets signaling Chinese interests in the port area. Recognizing the significance, the cross-functional team transmitted their findings through SOC Africa to the 8th PSYOP Group's Information Warfare Center at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Hey guys, they're not operating in here, by the way. No one is operating in here. They don't do this. As the first Special Forces Commandos US-based, this is continental US-based information warfare capability, the IWC leveraged the global first SFCA's network to illuminate the threat activity. They rapidly integrated the 389th Intelligence Battalion's all-source intelligence against the Chinese investment in Naravu. Assisted by sophisticated artificial intelligence and machine learning, within 48 hours, the IWC found the original source of the advertisements, a Chinese construction conglomerate active in Naravu over the last 2 years. The advertisement announced a deep water port that would begin construction in just over a month. Okay, so here's what we've learned. Special operations but soldiers are going around countries, and anytime they see evidence of development or investment, they're working overtime to try to destroy it. You think this is good for Africa? You think this is good for Africa? Oh, they're trying to build a port. Let's destroy the port. It further confirmed the port as a key node in China's Belt and Road Initiative for 2025 and likely naval intentions for 2035. So in other words, they just made it up. They just made it up. Oh, if China helps this country build a port, that means they'll have a military base there in 20 years. So I guess we'll destroy the port. Even in their fantasy, they're making shit up. The IWC immediately developed an influence campaign to enable JIIM partners to discredit Chinese activities several weeks before the ribbon cutting ceremony and impede the Chinese from further purchasing land. South Africa directed the CFT to monitor and report on Chinese activities. What is JIMM partner? What's that mean? JIMM. Joint Intergovernmental Multinational. Cool. A project to train participants to plan and implement stability operations. What does that mean? What are stability operations, chat? What do you think that means? I'll give you a hint. Stability operations means how do you disrupt a society so that it collapses into civil war? Nehruvian government cooperation was key in stopping port establishment to inhibit further Chinese expansion. With groundbreaking less than a month away and American diplomats needing more time to persuade the Nehruvian leadership against Chinese investment, South Africa requested assistance from SOJTF-C, working for Fort Bragg, North Carolina. SOJTF-C developed a plan and established Mission Command to converge SOF capabilities on the problem. The problem of building a port in Africa. Stop building ports in Africa. Stop building ports in Africa. They first directed IWC to initiate their previously developed influence campaign. Wait a minute. Influence campaign? Influence campaign? What's this? What's this? I was told the United States just believes in democracy. What's happening here? Influence campaign? They just tell you what they do, guys. Relying on civil economic information provided by the CMSE, the IWC's approach empowered IWTFs in coordination with the JIIM to inflame long-standing friction between Nehruvian workers and Chinese corporations. Within days, protests supported by the CFT's ODA erupted across Chinese business headquarters and their embassy in Ajuba. So this is exactly what they did in Ukraine, by the way. Exactly what they did in Ukraine. To the letter. The Ukrainian president signed a deal with Russia for cheap, low-interest loans and subsidized natural gas to help support poor Ukrainians with home heating during the winter. And then this immediately happened. This is exactly what happened in Ukraine. And that's what led to the so-called Euromaidan, quote, revolution. Simultaneously, the IWC-led social media campaign illuminated the controversy to a global audience. SOJTF.C activated CMSE, who, working with local branches of the Nehruvian government, DOS, USAID, and NGOs, established job fairs near protest areas, providing disaffected workers with alternative employment options. Within 2 weeks, the construction company lost 60% of its required labor pool. With increased scrutiny from the international community and without a workforce, China's port opening was set back by months. The JIIM now had sufficient time to engage with the Nehruvian leadership, communicate the problem, and develop options. 1 week later, Nehruvian security forces discovered an illegal weapons cache. Wait a minute. Oh no. Wow, suddenly there's weapons here. How did we find these weapons? Oh no. Which it traced back to a subsidiary of the construction company. To further investigate the matter, they partnered with 3rd SFG's Hard Target Defeat Company to surveil the construction company's headquarters. Established by the HTD, the Nehruvian security forces accessed the building. While searching it, recovered blueprints for the proposed port facility. Naravu sent the recovered blueprints to DIA and analysts who identified plans for concrete footings specifically designed for CSA-9 surface-to-air DF-25 shore-to-ship missiles. These missiles, if in place in Naravu, would challenge America's air and sea lanes across the Atlantic. Armed with this information, the U.S. ambassador explained if China had placed these weapons at the port, Naravu would become a strategic target and potential war zone between great powers. China's true intent illuminated, the Nehruvian government seized the Chinese purchased land. This is the fantasy. Though the U.S. thwarted China's expansion of military plans, it was certain China would try to achieve the same goals in the future. Thankfully, Airsoft's forward presence in multiple regions would provide advanced warning of their activities, provide them ample opportunity to disrupt them, and if necessary, set conditions for the U.S. to win in conflict. First to observe, first to influence, first to compete. This is literally a plan to prevent African development. That's it. And this is what your tax dollars are going to in USAID.
USAID chases China all around the world, making sure that China doesn't monopolize contracts for critical minerals and port infrastructure all around the world.
Our strategic value. We are uniquely trained, resourced, and postured to compete on behalf of the nation across the spectrum of conflict. Psychological operations detachment. Civil affairs team. Persuade, change, influence. Secure the victory. This is exactly what we're talking about cutting. And we need to cut all of it. There shouldn't be European Command, Indo-Pacific Command, Central Command, Africa Command, and Southern Command. Abolish it all and withdraw.
But you may want to start changing your ways. Change your ways. Or changing your name.